before I decide what to talk about. Um, this weekend is the weekend that we honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and kind of by proxy, the experience of the Black community in our nation. And both the things they've gone through and the strides that they've made and the vision that we all hold for better, for a better way of overcoming our racial divide, for a better way of seeing justice for everyone. Those things that Dr. King worked for. So as I was thinking about, well, what do I want to do with this time that we have? And what would be the most appropriate thing? I was thinking about, well, geez, we could talk about some Black history. We could talk about the history of the oppressed and disenfranchised, going back into the Bible. There's a ton of things that we could do, but then I was reminded of the time last year that I spent at the King Center. Some of you may remember at the end of January, I went to a summit for unity ministers and leaders over in Atlanta, and there was like an optional third day that was really more recreational and informational than about the summit. And what they did was they took us on a bus trip, and we visited a couple of things, but the main chunk, the important piece of it, to me at least, was when we went over to the King Center in Atlanta, and we, got to go inside and tour all around it and just kind of soak it in. I had never been there before, and I found it very moving. And, there was a lot of things that were, primarily of historic value. Descriptions of meetings that he'd had and awards that he'd won and pictures of various events that had happened, everything down to clothes that he wore. But the thing that really struck me was on the outside of the building, there's this big kind of reflecting pool with fountains, and on a wall opposite are printed his 6 principles of nonviolence. And they are really, they're the foundation of, not just his philosophy, but what the center is doing today. And on their website, they not only, lay those out, but they also have the 6 steps of nonviolent social change. And I wanted to share, those 12 things with you today, because I think they really are worth taking a look at. And, I know that as I measure where I'm at in my heart and where I'm at in my speech and my actions right now, I got some work to do. And I have a lot of questions to ask myself about, is the way I'm coming across right now, and is what I am doing in the social justice space, is it effective? Is it working? Is it how I want to show up? Is it colored by my past? And there's quite a lot of things that this brings up for me. So I want to share these with you, and we can talk about them, or we can just look at them and see what comes up. So of the 6 principles, we start with principle 1. And this seems a little bit counterintuitive. You tend to think of people who are, the traditional American view, which is kind of toxically masculine. We tend to have in the past thought of people who are nonviolent, like conscientious objectors. I know when I was young, people claimed to be conscientious objectors to get out of Vietnam, and other people would accuse them of cowardice. So, kind of nonviolence and cowardice have been shoved together by a lot of people. But contrary to that viewpoint, and I think correctly so, Principle 1 says that nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. And then they go on to add that it is active, nonviolent resistance to evil, and that it is aggressive spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. So there is an element of non-passivity there, as well as non-violence. And Haley, since you're on the phone, the photo I have is that famous one of that single guy standing in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square. I mean, that guy was obviously acting non-violently, but it took balls the size of grapefruits to do what he did. And there are a lot of ways that people have done non-violent things that were hugely courageous over the years, and that's certainly one that comes to mind. But I was thinking, when I put this photo in, I could also put in a photo of the first little black kids that desegregated the schools in the South. When you think about a 6-year-old child who is being yelled at and screamed at and having to run a gamut, accompanied by National Guardsmen or state policemen or whatever, just so she can go to the first grade. That's hugely courageous. Principle 2 is that nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. And I know that this one for me is just a little difficult these days. It says that the end result of nonviolence is redemption and reconciliation. And the purpose of nonviolence is the creation of the beloved community. And the picture I have here, Haley, is this picture, and I believe this is somewhere in Germany or France, but it's a statue commemorating the Christmas Eve truce from the First World War. And it shows a Western soldier and a German soldier, and they're shaking hands over a soccer ball. Because if you remember the story, that Christmas Eve when the guns fell silent and they started singing Christmas carols, and then the guys kind of wandered out into no man's land and started having a little party, they played soccer as a way of breaking the ice. Right now, I know that, in my heart of hearts, I am perfectly okay with leaving some people behind. And that's not a good place for me. There's a song that I listen to, and it makes me cry when I listen to it. It's "No one gets to heaven if anybody else is left behind," and I think there's something to that. When we talk about what souls are here for and what's going to happen, I think that there really is, when we talk about our soul's purpose as a species, as the human race, or even as the purpose behind sentient beings. I think there's a real nugget of truth in that, even if it's been woo-wooed up some. And as easy as it is to want to consign certain people, or people who present themselves certain ways, to the dust heap of history, to be able to say that the end result of nonviolence is redemption and reconciliation is huge. And I know that I have some inner healing that I have to do before I can get there, if I'm being honest. Principle 3 says that nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. And they expound on it by saying that nonviolence recognizes that evildoers are also victims and are not evil people. and that the nonviolent resistor seeks to defeat evil, not people. I found this quote from Martin Luther King that I think this was taken from, where he said that we are out to defeat injustice and not white persons who may be unjust. We're having a tough time these days separating people from their beliefs. And I know that part of that goes back to the fact that when we talk about some of the things that we're talking about, including how white people treat black people, I can say that. To us, that's not like a political belief. It's a moral. It's part of our moral fiber. It's like part of who we are. And attempting to separate the way someone is currently behaving from the essence of that person is difficult. But what Dr. King is calling us to do is exactly that, and to say that, hey, that person that is doing bad is not bad. They're still a person, and it's likely that, they too are victims in some way or another. And I'll tell you, I know that as somebody who grew up with a bunch of those adverse childhood experiences and ended up as an alcoholic addict, I know that people are negatively impacted by the way they grew up. So when we see people dressing up 3-year-olds in Klan robes, if that 3-year-old grows up being a racist, well, it started out when somebody dressed them up in Klan robes when they were a toddler and took them to Klan meetings. I mean, it's and we're being called to do our best to save those people and defeat the ideal, not to in some way grind that person into the dust. And that's hard. Principle 4, nonviolence, holds that suffering for a cause can educate and transform people and societies. Man, this one is tough to swallow. They go on to say that nonviolence accepts suffering without retaliation, and that unearned suffering for a cause is redemptive and has tremendous educational and transforming possibilities. And I have, it may be hard to read, and I know that you can't see it, Haley, but I have another quote of King's over here on the image that I pasted in there. And he says, "I'm not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive." It so totally seems counterintuitive that we should let somebody do something like that to us. And yet, history has proven time and time again that if you keep slapping back, all that does is perpetuates the violence. You take a look at what has happened places where they have actually used the principles of nonviolence, like India, and to some extent South Africa, and even the civil rights movement in the United States. And compare that to what has happened between Israel and Palestine. And it really does seem like at some point, if somebody is permanently the aggressor and is permanently seen as kind of the jackbooted thugs, that there's going to be a reckoning. And I know that for people of color in the United States, it seems like, well, we've been trying that for a long time, and it hadn't happened yet. But when I look around the world at those cultures where it's always been an eye for an eye, tooth for the tooth, and you slap me, I slap you, you kill my brother, I kill yours, it never stops. It just never stops. So as difficult as this is, I believe that there is some underlying truth to it and some underlying wisdom that, difficult as it is, we have to take a look at and listen to. He says that principle number 5 is nonviolence chooses love instead of hate. They go on to say nonviolence resists violence of the spirit as well as the body. Nonviolent love is spontaneous, unmotivated, unselfish, and creative. And I found a quote talking about Nelson Mandela. What I've learned from Nelson Mandela, no matter what happens in life, choose kindness over anger, love over hate, and forgiveness over resentment. That is so difficult and yet so powerful. And so I was listening to a meditation earlier today, and it was talking about the people inside us, the person who is anger and violence, and the person who is peace, and they're both in there. And which one of those people, it's like the meme that I see all over the place about the Native American talking to his grandson about the two coyotes inside us, the dark one and the light one. It's whichever one we feed. And in this meditation, it was, which person do I give rein to? Because the more I feed that anger and that hate and that part of me that can burn cities down, the more that colors my life and my experience of life. And, do I really want to live in that place? And I'll tell you, this has been a lifelong struggle for me. I grew up in a pretty violent household. My father was extremely violent, particularly with my mother. And kind of what trickled downstream to us was mostly, corporal punishment using a variety of implements. Although, it finally crescendoed to him putting my younger sister in the hospital. And that was when I talked my mom into divorcing my dad. But those years of experiencing violence, both first and second hand, they wired my brain into a violent response. Even if it's not physical violence, the instinct and the experience is there. And to be able to choose to respond from love it's in a lot of ways, it still requires a conscious choice. I still have that demon, who's got a weapon in each hand, ready to spring. And I've still got that fear, I guess, that's deep inside. But that's not a way to live, trust me. I mean, living with a mind that constantly goes to anger, violence, what's the worst thing that can happen? How do I fight my way out of this? It's a special kind of hell. And nobody wants to live that way. When I choose love, in whatever form it needs to take in this moment, whether it's just something as small as a simple preference over salt and pepper, or anything, any small thing, when I choose love in any moment over anger, hate, violence, the light side of the force over the dark side of the force, it completely changes who I am and my experience of the world in that moment. And I think what King is saying is that even when the shit is hitting the fan, we still have that choice. Even when there is huge injustice, we don't have to respond to injustice with violence. And that's hard. That's really hard for me. I'm working on it, but I've got a ways to go. And this one gets back to one of those gigantic ideas when we talk about the things that religion is here for. Principle number 6 says that nonviolence believes that the universe is on the side of justice. And the kind of the bullet points under it are that the nonviolent resistor has deep faith that justice will eventually win. And nonviolence believes that God is a God of justice. When we talk about religion being the arena of ultimate concerns, right? Like, what happens when we die, and what's life all about anyway? One of the big ultimate concerns is, what is the nature of the universe? And the kind of the binary solution set that a lot of us come down to is either A, the universe is out to get me, or B, the universe is a good place, it loves me and supports me, and and God is a God of justice. And I love this this passage from Isaiah. This is from Isaiah chapter 30, verse 18. Therefore, the Lord longs to be gracious to you, and therefore he waits on high to have compassion on you. For the Lord is a God of justice. How blessed are all those who long for him. And I think of God as the universe, everything in it, all that lies behind it, and the laws by which it operates. So when I think of the universe in that context, it's very comforting. And so would I rather live being comforted or live being paranoid? A lot of people would say, well, you're safer being paranoid, but are you better off? Honest to God, are you better off that way? I can't say that I would be, than I have been. In those moments when I felt that way. So once we get past the 6 principles, we get to those steps of, how do we use nonviolence and nonviolent means to work for justice? So according to the teachings of the King Center, this is, how do we actually put nonviolent principles into action? Okay, and the first thing that they suggest is information gathering, and that really appeals to the both the staff officer and targeting officer that I was in the military, because the first thing you want to know is what's going on out there, right? Okay, let's get the intel guys, the S2, to tell us what's up. So what they say is, to understand and articulate an issue, problem, or injustice facing a person, community, or institution, you must do research. You must investigate and gather all vital information from all sides of the argument or issue, so as to increase your understanding of the problem. You must become an expert on your opponent's position, and that is enlightening. I know that I have purposely avoided reading any of that QAnon kind of craziness, but what this tells me is that I have some homework to do, right? And I found this is an interesting little slide I found out there on Google about information gathering. And I thought it was, I just thought I would include this. It says there are 2 types of methods for gathering information about a system. There are interactive methods which interact with the users of the existing system, or unobtrusive passive methods which observe aspects of the existing system. And then our goal is to understand the good and bad aspects of the existing system to help determine requirements for our new system. So it was interesting. So I guess, you know, if I was going to use one of those interactive methods, I would actually, you know, have jumped on Parler before they shut it down and got in there and pretended to be one of them. That would be really, that'd be tough. But that's what we're suggesting is, you know, find out from the inside what the other people are thinking about. Then education, which is kind of like, you know, the opposite. Instead of just taking information in on our side, we're going to inform other people about our side. It says it is essential to inform others, including your opposition, about your issue. This minimizes misunderstandings and gains you support and sympathy. And the image that I picked out of all the ones that I found is a statue of Abraham Lincoln with, there's a slave. It's obviously made or sculpted, I guess, to be an African American, and that person is like rising from their knees, and the carved into the bottom, into the base of the statue, it says emancipation. And you know, I think a lot of white people, they don't get it. You know, they don't see that image and understand that there's a piece of that that's still not done. There's a big piece of that that's still not done. And they also don't understand the effect that the presence of that and that which preceded it changed all of us. And it didn't just change our great grandparents, it changed us. And we need to educate people about that. Personal commitment. I'm going to say the C word there. And the way that they explain it at the King Center is it's a daily check and affirm your faith in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. So in 12-step, we have step 10, which is daily you do a personal inventory, and you know, if I'm wrong, you know, immediately admit it and go make amends for it. So this is kind of very familiar for me. So daily check and affirm your faith in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence, eliminate hidden motives, and prepare yourself to accept suffering if necessary in your work for justice. You know, and self-awareness work is work that we have to do every day. That's one of the reasons that I suggest doing meditation every day. You know, if you have to sit in the silence with yourself every day, it's a whole lot easier to realize what is it that's going on with me right now, right? What's up with Charles? Like if I'm just doing, go all the time, it's harder to know. But when we spend some time in the silence, it's real easy to see what's up and to do this daily check. This one's a tough one. And I know that a lot of us have been denigrating our president-elect for his penchant to go straight there. And it's one word, negotiation. So negotiation, and the King Center says it's using grace, humor, and intelligence, confront the other party with a list of injustices and a plan for addressing and resolving these injustices. Look for what is positive in every action and statement the opposition makes. Do not seek to humiliate the opponent, but to call forth the good in the opponent. Boy, have I ever been failing at doing this like really badly. You know, I gotta admit, when I go to burn somebody on Facebook, all I'm doing is really trying to prove a point and trying to, I back up to the education step. And it's like, I'm going to tell you all about it and I'm going to square you away because I'm going to, explain exactly why I'm right and you're an idiot. But that doesn't leave me a whole lot for this step, for the negotiation. And I have to admit that I have not always been the best at using grace, humor, and intelligence, right? I may have used some intelligence. Every once in a while, I may use some humor, but grace has been missing from my social justice educational vocabulary. And I need to work on that. Also looking for what is positive in every action and statement the opposition makes. I have really not been looking for the positive. I've been accentuating the negative, right? So negotiation, there is something in there, and obviously there's something to that, where the King Center would not be telling us we need to learn how to do it. Now, following that, we get to direct action. And what they say is that these are actions taken when the opponent is unwilling to enter into or remain in discussion/negotiation. These actions impose a creative tension into the conflict, supplying moral pressure on your opponent to work with you in resolving the injustice. And of course, direct action is the protests, and the strikes, the boycotts, and to some extent the drives to register voters. Getting out the vote and having more minority candidates run for office. Things that are going to have a direct effect. But what they're talking about primarily is things like the protests and strikes and things. But it's, again, when the opponent is unwilling to enter into or remain in discussion/negotiation. And finally, and again, this one sometimes is a tough one to swallow, reconciliation. And what the King Center says is that nonviolence seeks friendship and understanding with the opponent. And boy, I got to admit, I've not always been right on top of that. I just want to win. I just want there to be justice for everybody, and to make things right for the BIPOC community and the LGBTQIA community and the disabled community. And quite frankly, I'm not that worried about people that look like me. But nonviolence seeks friendship and understanding with the opponent. Nonviolence does not seek to defeat the opponent, and I have not learned that yet. Nonviolence is directed against evil systems, forces, oppressive policies, unjust acts, but not against persons. Through reasoned compromise, both sides resolve the injustice with a plan of action. Each act of reconciliation is one step close to the beloved community. And the quote that I have from Dr. King next to that is, our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. And what I have to hear when I hear that is he's not talking to guys wearing sheets with, pointing hats, although he is. But that also means he's talking to me, because I need to make a qualitative change in my soul as well, because I haven't quite gotten to what it takes, to really be a non-violent social justice warrior.
Can I just, what I'm going to say here?
Go ahead.
But, okay, so I don't know if you ever read the book David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, but one of the arguments that he makes is that King was tactically nonviolent. He used nonviolence because he felt like it was the best tactic. In fact, he started in Georgia trying to, with a movement in Georgia, and it didn't work because their sheriff and their law enforcement was not as outrageously, violently racist. That's why they went to Birmingham, is because Birmingham had Bull Connor, and Bull Connor was the worst. And so he actually went seeking out violent law enforcement that would enforce, that would brutalize essentially the protesters, because he felt like what was necessary was to draw national attention to the acts of white racists in the South. And it wasn't getting done in Georgia. So I believe he was tactically nonviolent, but I don't believe, like, I think it was a performative friendship and a performative understanding. I don't think that there really is any room for compromise between racists and anti-racists. There is no reconciliation really, because reconciliation assumes a middle ground. I don't buy there is a middle ground between racism and anti-racism. I don't buy that there is a middle ground. Honestly, there's not a middle ground between me and somebody who feels like it's okay to storm the Capitol because their autocrat didn't get reelected, you know? So I don't know. I'm very reluctant to accept an idea of seeking friendship and understanding with the opponent, because understanding assumes that there is a place of compromise or middle ground, and I don't buy there is.
So I'm just
Can I?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to give a middle ground to that, because I totally agree with that on one level, but I think that there also is a lot to learn about how somebody arrives at, you know, that other position, and I do think that that's from early hurt, and you know, so I do think that we all want some level of security. We all want, you know, to not have to struggle for our very survival every day. And I do think that we all have that in common. Although, you know, obviously people channel that differently. So I both agree and don't agree with that.
You know, I think that the area of compromise that we can work in is in the actions, you know, within the reality. And, you know, I mean, I keep seeing this meme that says, hey, you know, if you're against gay marriage, don't get gay married. If you're against abortion, don't have an abortion. If you're against whatever it is, just don't do it. But, you know, don't try to make it so other people can't do it. And I think that's the first area of compromise, is in allowing people their rights and freedoms, and simply by allowing that, but, you know, saying, but you don't have to do it, right? If we can get people to that level of tolerance, you know, that to me is the first big area of compromise. Like, yeah, okay, I may not be able to change your mind about this. You know, I'm not gonna walk into your evangelical church and start screaming that abortion needs to be legalized. I mean, if you want to continue to think women don't own their body, it's fine, as long as they do own their bodies. You know, and then hopefully eventually, you know, by us living with one another in tolerance, you know, that may lead to something a little better than tolerance. That to me is that's the kind of the ground that where some negotiation is possible for right now.
Yeah, but I guess my point is that if one group is willing to be tolerant, like I am absolutely 100% willing to accept someone into my life who, you know, opposes abortion. Okay, fine. Don't get one. But if one group, their entire ideology is based around non-tolerance, then you don't even have a place to start from. Like, Haley, you're right, absolutely, that everybody wants the ability to just survive and to be able to not worry about their survival every day. And we all want a certain level of stability and the capability to have the freedom to make our own choices. Absolutely. But I also think that there legitimately are groups of people where part of their ideology is non-tolerance. And what the tolerant people always end up losing out there, because they're willing to compromise and the anti-tolerant people are not. And so all the compromising happens on one side.
Yeah, well, then that gets back to when you go to direct action. When the opponent is unwilling to enter into or remain in discussion / negotiation. If they're not willing to, that's when you go to direct action.
Yeah, but you're assuming that moral pressure is something that's going to resonate with them.
Well, you know, it may not resonate with them, but the question is does it resonate with a large enough chunk of the population to move the needle in your direction? And, you know, boy, are we ever seeing that played out. I mean, yes, may there be some stupid people doing something this week that they really shouldn't do. Sure, it's possible. But the vast majority of Americans have seen what's been going on and been like, oh, hell no. No.
It's hard because I guess I feel like I think I understand, I guess, where Charles is coming from, what he's trying to say, but also like the way things have been going, like I think that approach sometimes does not get what we think it will accomplish, because if you have like a step and you say, I will tolerate this for just, or not saying that you tolerate the racism itself, but I will tolerate the people that are racist. If you take that one step back, then those people they don't think, wow, we can have a conversation now. They think, I'm right. They back down. And so like, that's where the struggle is. And then you've also got this other issue where a lot of this is coming from just ignorance and unwillingness to step outside of I guess, the social circle that you've grown up around. Because I think I've seen with some of the people I've cared about who have espoused some of these, you know, completely racist and horrible things, it is not that they are trying to be racist. It's not like they sit there and they in their heads are like, I hate, you know, this group of people or whatever. It's that they've grown up in such a maybe not isolated, but homogenous type of place that they don't have any idea what other people are like, and what they're hearing from bad education, from racist elders, from all these people that they've grown up with. They don't realize how wrong they are, and they won't until they are able to experience a different group of people, I guess. And so like how can we, while on one hand also educate, where I'm
Totally agree with you, Nikki.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing that I don't think that Dr. King could have foreseen is that there are people who are being seduced by an alternate reality. You know, back in the day, you know, the three different networks that there were reported the news very stoically and very matter-of-factly. You know, the opinion pieces were happened on the editorial page of the local newspaper, and pretty much, you know, people understood that what the media was doing their best to do was to put out the truth. You know, they might make mistakes from time to time, but you know, if ABC, NBC, and CBS all said, you know, hey, today a rocket went to the moon, we all believe the rocket went to the moon. You know, with a few exceptions, and you know, there's oddballs everywhere, but you know, the kind of subculture of alternate reality simply did not exist. And so when they talk about doing education, the problem is that we're swimming upstream against an alternate reality. And boy, that does make this real tough. And I 100% agree with that. So I want to ask here real quick, what's ours to do today? You know, to be honest with ourselves about whether or not we're willing to live by and advocate the principles of nonviolence. You know, if this is not for you, okay. But if you think, you know what, that really is the right thing to do, then, you know, like I know for me, I have to be honest with myself about where I'm at. I'm not at Dr. King level of nonviolence right now, you know. And I really have to ask myself, am I willing to go there? And do I think that's going to be effective? And then if we're currently willing but not, we have to take an honest inventory of, you know, where we're at. And that's certainly something I think that I need to do. I think we need to find the most important principle that we need to work on as individuals and begin our individual journey toward nonviolence. And, you know, like in that meditation I was doing today, boy, if I can just live inside my own skull in a less violent place, that's going to have a profound effect on my quality of life, as well as on the way I show up in everything I do in making things happen, you know, in the outside Charles's skin world, right? And then find a group that espouses nonviolent social change and work with others for justice for all. You know, we're doing what we do in our community here, but there, you know, are likely other communities that are larger and, you know, have more of a boots on ground effect, whether it's Black Lives Matter or Justice in Action or any of a number of other groups that, you know, we can all be part of, or, you know, each of us can pick something to be a part of and get out there and actually do something. You know, it's great if I can find nonviolence within my own consciousness, but to be able to work for justice nonviolently outside my own skin is also, that's essentially what Dr. King was teaching us to do.